It's not a surprise that we share so many similar obstacles and challenges, but this also gives us courage to struggle against anti-democratic and patriarchal regimes together. Being a feminist scholar in Turkey means working under the pressure of both neoliberal university precarity and state-backed anti-gender political climate. Since the post-state of emergency period and Turkey's withdrawal from the Istanbul Convention, the space for feminist academics has become much more restricted. Nilgün Toker, she is a professor of political philosophy, defines the current regime as a regime of uncertainty. The regime of uncertainty is not merely a matter of unpredictability. It is also a state of constant doubt, in which we cannot establish causal links between events and decisions, offer rational explanations, or understand why things happen. Just this week, the ex-accounts of numerous women's and LGBTIQ+ organizations were blocked on the grounds of national security and public order. An LGBTI activist and journalist, Yıldız Star, was arrested in house raid. These unlawful practices are part of the criminalization of feminist and queer activism. So here's how I frame my experience in this context. Resistance for me no longer always looked like grand institutional protest. It has transformed into everyday strategic and persistent survival practices. The transformation of Turkey's political and social landscape has also shaped the gender scholarship. Since coming to power in 2002, the AKP government has made limited and often unconvincing efforts to promote gender equality. In several of his public statements, President Erdogan argued that he does not believe women and men can be equal because of what he described as natural differences. From this perspective, the family is placed at the center of social life, and women are mainly discussed in relation to their roles within the family, especially as wives and mothers. This reflects a religiously conservative view that presents these roles as natural and expected. Gender is officially recognized by Board of Higher Education as a subfield within broader disciplines such as political science, psychology, or sociology. However, since 2019, the Women's and Gender Studies Research Centers at many universities has been renamed Women and Family Studies Application and Research Center, and newly established centers have not been allowed to open under these names. The Gender Equality Position Paper, which was adopted by YÖK, the Board of Higher Education, was also abolished by the same institution in 2019. Its president explained it as the project was not compatible with social values and was not accepted by society. However, because EU projects required gender equality plan, it had to be brought back into force. This is also a reflection of the regime of uncertainty I mentioned earlier. So in this unpredictability regime, I'm trying to hold on to certain practices tightly. First one is insisting on curriculum. In an environment where the state and university administrations are actively trying to erase the concept of gender from course catalogs, simply keeping this terminology on my syllabus and continuing to teach critical thought in a daily act of resistance. Another one is building circles of care. Against the isolating and hyper-competitive nature of the neoliberal university, I focus on creating networks of solidarity and emotional care with my colleagues and my students. And the third one is strategic maneuver. Rather than self-censoring to avoid institutional backlash, I often frame academic activities more acceptable or conventional academic titles to ensure that knowledge production and communication continue uninterrupted. The core attack is directed at the conceptual framework, such as critique of the patriarchal family and ties to the grassroots activism. Within the government's aggressive mobilization around the traditional values, exemplified by the overarching rhetoric of a state-sponsored family years and family summits, the concept of family has been turned into a political weapon. Because my work critiques the normative patriarchal family structure as a site of unequal labor and gender-based violence, or questioning binary gender identities, or doing critical masculinity studies, might not be treated just as an academic critique, but framed by authorities as a threat to the nation's moral fabric. The state's push to replace gender equality with terms like family preservation, nature, and gender justice directly targets the theoretical foundation of our research. Academics are being pressured to transition from gender studies to family and women's studies, which completely erases queer existences. Feminist research is originally and organically linked to feminist movements, LGBTIQ advocacy, and concrete policy demands. This connection is perceived, again, as a major threat by institutions that want universities to be sterile spaces, stripped of dissident voices. Shrinking research funds, increasing the hostile ethic committees at some universities, and heightened political risks are marginalizing specific types of knowledge production, especially anything that contradicts the state's narrative. Trying to get funding or ethics approvals to study abortion, alternative kinship, or LGBTIQ lives is almost impossible now. These topics are often blocked or never be funded. Conducted empirical fieldwork that centers the experiences of Kurdish women, state violence, or systemic poverty is obstructed at nearly every institutional stage. Also, as Connell argues, being a researcher becomes being just a brain in a jar. The publish or perish cycle and job precarity makes it incredibly difficult to employ long-term participatory feminist methodologies that rely on building trust and rapport. For me, political commitment is sustained directly through my teaching. I see the classroom not just a space for knowledge transfer, but as a site of active political engagement through feminist pedagogy. I'm trying to democratize the classroom. I'm trying to shake the traditional expert-student hierarchy by valuing student experiences as legitimate sources of knowledge. Creating knowledge together instead of simply delivering it to my student, it sustains my political commitment. I design my courses and seminars so feminist and queer theory connects directly to the political realities we face beyond the campuses. In a heavily monitored academic environment, I am trying to create safe enough spaces, providing a space where students feel secure enough to debate, question normative structures, and express their political exhaustion without fear and censorships seems like an important practice today. I found my solidarity in horizontal networks in both inside and outside of academic structures, university structures, independent research groups such as Solidarity Academies, which are formed by Perch academics and independent research institutes that operate beyond state control, is one unique example of this. I draw great strength from young queer and feminist students on campuses in Turkey. Despite police presence and disciplinary threat, they continue to organize and push for intersectional equality. And last but not the least, transnational ties, connecting with international feminist academic networks, especially scholars who understand the Turkish political climate or are fighting similar anti-government movements in their own countries provides crucial professional and emotional encouragement. I'm deeply thankful to all of you in that sense. So thank you very much for listening.